My mother left me stranded at the airport at 15, off to enjoy a luxury trip with her new husband and kids. "You'll manage?" she scoffed. I did, by calling my estranged dad, who flew in on a private jet. When she returned, my room was gone and eviction papers waited. My name is Blanche, and at 15 years old, I believed one dinner could bridge the chasm that had opened between my mother and me. I was painfully, utterly wrong. By the time dessert was served, I was staring at a $200 bill in my trembling hand, abandoned at an international airport, and that moment set in motion a chain of events that would completely redefine my understanding of family. Tell me where you're tuning in from today, and hit that subscribe button. The journey from that terminal to finding my true home is a story you won't want to miss. My earliest memories with my mother were bathed in a warm glow. I picture Saturday afternoons at the neighborhood park, her hands gently propelling me higher and higher on the swing set until my stomach fluttered with pure joy. On my 6th birthday, she presented me with a slightly askew chocolate cake, its uneven frosting somehow more perfect than any store-bought masterpiece. Our tiny apartment, adorned with crepe paper streamers she'd crafted herself, felt like the grandest palace. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and back then, that bond felt unbreakable. Then, when I was 8, the world shifted. I walked in from school to find my parents perched on opposite ends of our worn sofa, a silence so thick it felt suffocating hanging between them. They uttered a few vague words about adults sometimes falling out of love, a generic explanation that only bred more questions than answers. That night, I cried myself to sleep, clutching my worn stuffed rabbit, the muffled accusations from their bedroom seeping through the thin walls. My mother gained full custody, and my father, once a constant presence, began to recede. His bi-weekly visits stretched to monthly, then to infrequent, awkward phone calls. By my 10th birthday, he was little more than a name on official papers, a hazy echo in my mind. Life as a single-parent household was challenging. My mother worked tirelessly, waiting tables by day, scrubbing office buildings by night, just to keep our heads above water. I grew accustomed to instant meals and the jingle of the apartment key around my neck. Despite our financial tightrope walk, there was a steady rhythm to our days. I understood the routines, knew my place, and never doubted I was the primary focus of her world. Everything changed again when I was 13. My mother met Richard at the restaurant. He was a successful businessman, always leaving generous tips, always requesting her section. I remember the first time she mentioned him. Her cheeks flushed with an unfamiliar excitement as she described his expensive suits and the way he looked at her, as if she was someone truly exceptional. Their relationship accelerated at a breathtaking pace. 6 months later, Richard proposed. The diamond on my mother's calloused hand seemed impossibly large, a glittering promise of a life far removed from our coupon-clipping existence. Before I could truly grasp the concept of a stepfather, we were packing our sparse belongings and moving into his sprawling house in the suburbs. It boasted a swimming pool, a private movie theater, and enough bathrooms to get lost in. The house also came with 3 additional residents, Richard's children from his previous marriage. Olivia, a year my senior at 14, met my gaze with a constant air of superiority that made me feel instantly small. 12-year-old Jackson was quiet, almost a ghost, barely registering my presence. 10-year-old Zoe, the youngest, initially offered a fleeting warmth, but that too dissolved once we all lived under the same roof. It became painfully clear, almost immediately, that I was an unwelcome outlier in this pre-made family unit. Richard was unfailingly polite, but his genuine warmth and beaming smiles were reserved for his own children. Dinner conversations became agonizing exercises in silence for me, as my mother and Richard discussed private school tuition, exclusive country club memberships, and exotic vacation homes, topics from a world utterly foreign to me. When I tried to contribute, offering a thought on a school project or a book I'd enjoyed, my words were met with perfunctory nods before the discussion veered back to the stepchildren's accomplishments in tennis, debate club, or piano recitals. The most profound heartbreak was witnessing my mother's metamorphosis. The woman who once meticulously clipped coupons and scoured sale racks now spoke with authority on designer labels and Michelin-starred restaurants. She altered her appearance, dyed her hair, whitened her teeth, and with an awkward laugh, would refer to our previous life as the lean years, when Richard's friends were present. It was as if she was shedding her old self, and in doing so, discarding the parts of her connected to me. I yearned to belong. I offered to help Olivia with her algebra, complimented Zoe's drawings, and tried to engage Jackson about his video games. My efforts were met with cool indifference at best, outright dismissal at worst. One particular sting, still sharp, was overhearing Olivia on the phone, telling a friend her dad's new wife came with extra baggage, and I knew unequivocally she meant me. As summer approached, Richard announced a 2-week family vacation to Bali, staying at an exclusive resort with private villas and personal attendants. Despite the growing chasm between my mother and me, a flicker of hope ignited. Perhaps this was it, a chance to finally form a connection with my new family, away from the daily pressures. That hope was swiftly extinguished. My mother took the stepchildren on an elaborate shopping spree for new vacation wardrobes, but I was not invited. When I asked why, she simply stated I had plenty of clothes already. A stark contrast to my stepsister's designer bikinis. I spent my babysitting money on a modest, blue one-piece, a stark reminder of my place. A week before the trip, I overheard a chilling conversation. My mother and Richard were in their bedroom, the door ajar, unaware I was passing by. "What about arrangements for Blanche?" Richard's voice was low. "All taken care of," my mother replied, her tone dismissive, making a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "She won't be a problem." When I later pressed her about it, she waved away my concerns with a vague, "Just trip details, honey, nothing for you to worry about." The morning of our departure dawned in a flurry of activity and anticipation. Designer luggage was loaded into Richard's luxury SUV. I noticed my passport wasn't with the stack of travel documents. My mother quickly mumbled something about having it in her purse, hurrying me along. In retrospect, the signs were glaring. Her averted gaze in the car, the lack of discussion about my seat assignment when everyone else argued over window seats, my inexplicably smaller suitcase. But at 15, desperate to believe I was truly part of this family, I silenced the alarm bells clanging in my head. The international terminal was a swirling vortex of travelers, suitcases, and harried airline staff. Richard, a seasoned traveler, navigated the crowds with practiced ease, my mother by his side, her designer bag clutched tightly. Olivia, Jackson, and Zoe followed, their faces alight with excitement. I trailed behind, struggling with my small carry-on. At the check-in counter, Richard presented a stack of passports. 5, not 6. A heavy dread settled in my gut as boarding passes were handed out, one for each of them, none for me. "Excuse me," I piped up, stepping forward, my voice thin. "I think you forgot my boarding pass." The airline attendant looked puzzled. "I only have 5 passengers on this reservation." Richard cleared his throat. "Your mother needs to speak with you about that. We'll go ahead to security." As the stepchildren and Richard pushed their luggage cart away, my mother took my arm and steered me to a quiet corner by a gift shop. Her face bore an expression I'd never witnessed, a strange blend of detachment and mild irritation. "Listen, Blanche," she said, her voice eerily calm. "There's been a change of plans. You're not coming with us to Bali." The words struck me like a physical blow. "What? Why? Did I do something wrong?" She sighed, her gaze flickering towards Richard and the others waiting at the security line. "Richard thinks this should be a trip just for us and his kids. A chance to really bond as a family." "But I'm family too," I protested, my voice cracking. "I'm your daughter." "Don't make a scene," she hissed, fumbling in her purse. She produced a wad of cash and pressed it into my hand. "Here's $200. You can figure it out. Just take an Uber home." I stared at the money, utterly disbelieving. "You're leaving me at the airport? Alone? I don't even have a house key." She offered the same casual shrug that would haunt my sleep for years. Mrs. Peterson next door has the spare. You'll be fine. You're mature for your age. Tears welled, hot and stinging, as the full, horrifying reality washed over me. Mom, please! You can't do this! Richard's waiting, she said, her eyes darting nervously towards the checkpoint. This vacation is important for our future, Blanche. Sometimes we all have to make sacrifices. Sacrifice is giving up a concert ticket! I yelled, anger finally piercing through my shock. This is abandonment. She flinched but quickly regained her composure. Don't be so dramatic. It's just 2 weeks. The refrigerator's stocked, and I left money for pizza in the kitchen drawer. She leaned in, a quick, dry kiss on my forehead. I'll call you when we land. With that, she turned and walked away, her expensive heels clicking on the tiled floor as she rejoined Richard and the stepchildren. I watched, numb, as they moved through security. My mother never once glanced back. Olivia caught my eye briefly, a faint smirk on her lips, before they vanished from sight. I remained rooted to the spot, the $200 crumpled in my trembling hand. Around me, the airport hummed with its usual rhythm, travelers rushing, families embracing, announcements echoing. But for me, time had ceased. The sheer magnitude of my mother's betrayal crashed down. The tears came, unbidden, pouring down my face as I sank onto a nearby bench. A few passers-by offered curious or concerned glances, but no one paused. In an airport, a crying teenager was merely part of the scenery, easily dismissed, quickly forgotten. I spent the next hour in a daze, watching the departure board. Their flight status changed from boarding to departed. Each update felt like a new stab. I tried calling my mother's cell repeatedly. It went straight to voicemail. My text showed as delivered but remained unread. Hope abandoning your child was worth the first-class upgrade, I finally texted, a surge of anger temporarily eclipsing the hurt. No reply came, nor did I truly expect one. My mother, I imagined, was likely settling into her seat, perhaps sipping champagne next to Richard, relieved to have shed the burden of her previous life, including me. As afternoon bled into evening, my predicament grew increasingly dire. An airport security officer approached me in the food court, where I'd been nursing a soda to justify my table. "Everything okay, miss?" he asked, his expression a mix of suspicion and concern. "You've been here for several hours now." "I'm waiting for my ride," I lied, avoiding his eyes. "They got stuck in traffic." He seemed unconvinced but nodded, moving on after advising me not to leave my bag unattended. A fresh wave of shame washed over me. How could I confess that my own mother had left me? The words caught in my throat, choked by humiliation and a lingering, foolish loyalty. As the evening crowds thinned and shops began to pull down their security gates, the grim reality became undeniable. $200 wouldn't last long, and even if I made it back to the house, I'd be alone for 2 weeks with no transport and limited funds. I found myself in an airport restroom, splashing cold water on my tear-streaked face, desperately trying to formulate a plan. The girl in the mirror was a stranger, her eyes red and haunted. In that moment, I knew something fundamental had broken. The invisible cord connecting me to my mother, the implicit trust that she would always protect me, had been irreparably severed. 6 hours had passed since my mother walked away. I drifted from bench to bench, terminal to terminal, watching families and couples embarking on shared adventures. Each passing hour deepened my isolation. My phone battery was critically low, layering on another anxiety. Around 8 p.m., I ventured into an airport restaurant that was still open. I perched at the counter and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a side of fries, to conserve my dwindling cash. The server, a woman named Gloria with kind eyes, brought my food and then paused, studying my face. "You okay, honey?" she asked gently. "You look like you've been crying." I attempted a smile that felt more like a grimace. "I'm fine. Just a long day." She didn't press. A few minutes later, she returned with a chocolate milkshake I hadn't ordered. "On the house," she said with a wink. Whatever's going on, sugar and chocolate never hurt. Her small act of kindness nearly unraveled me completely. I thanked her, a lump in my throat, and slowly ate while scrolling through my phone contacts, searching for anyone, anywhere, who might help. My list of options was depressingly short. Most of my old friends had drifted away after our move, and I had made few new ones in Richard's affluent neighborhood. I tried texting 2 of my mother's old friends, women who had once been close to us. One didn't reply. The other sent a brief message saying she was out of town. It seemed my mother, in moving on to her new life, had discarded her old support network as thoroughly as she had our small apartment and budget groceries. As I scrolled, a name caught my eye that made my heart leap: Dad. I hadn't spoken to him in over 3 years. Our last conversation had been a brief, awkward call on my 12th birthday. After that, he seemed to have vanished. My mother had always implied he wasn't interested in being part of my life, that he had a new family who took priority. Your father has moved on, she'd always say when I asked about him. Some men just aren't cut out for parenthood. I stared at his contact, my thumb hovering over the call button. What if he rejected me too? What if my mother had been telling the truth, and he genuinely wanted nothing to do with me? The thought of another abandonment felt unbearable. I returned to the airport restroom, locking myself in a stall for privacy. I rehearsed what to say, trying different openings. Hi Dad, it's Blanche. I know it's been a while. No, too casual. Hello, this is Blanche. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm in trouble. Better, but still not right. In the end, raw desperation overpowered pride. With shaking fingers, I pressed the call button and held my breath as the phone rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. I was about to hang up when a deep voice answered. Hello? The sound of his voice, so familiar yet so strange after years, momentarily stole my ability to speak. Hello, is anyone there? He asked again. Dad? I finally managed, my voice small and uncertain. There was a pause. Blanche? Is that really you, sweetheart? The tremor of concern in his voice fractured something deep inside me. Dad, I need help. I choked out, and then the entire story poured out, a torrent of words punctuated by sobs. The remarriage, the move, the airport, the $200 bill. By the end, I was barely coherent. She left you alone at the airport? His voice had hardened, the initial shock replaced by a steely edge. Where are you now? Which airport? I told him, half expecting him to offer to call a social services agency or perhaps wire me money for a hotel. Stay exactly where you are, he said, his tone firm. I'm coming to get you myself. It'll take me about 3 hours to reach you. Can you stay safe until then? You're coming here? I asked, disbelief thick in my voice. You don't have to do that. Maybe you could just help me get home, Blanche. He interrupted. I'm coming to get you. Find the customer service desk for the airline your mother was flying with. Tell them your situation. I'll call ahead and make sure they take care of you until I arrive. After he hung up, I sat in the bathroom stall for several minutes, trying to comprehend what had just happened. My father, whom I believed had no interest in me, was dropping everything to come to my rescue. It seemed too good to be true, and a lifetime of disappointments had taught me to be wary of hope. Nevertheless, I followed his instructions, approaching the customer service desk with a pounding heart. To my surprise, the airline staff were immediately empathetic. They led me to a private waiting area, brought me a sandwich and juice, and assured me they would watch over me until my father arrived. Unfortunately, this happens more often than you'd think, the customer service manager confided quietly. Parents changing plans at the last minute, leaving kids to fend for themselves. The 3-hour wait felt both endless and surreal. I drifted between hope, fear, and utter exhaustion. What if my father didn't show up? What if he did, but resented having to rescue me? What if this was all an elaborate setup for another rejection? My mind replayed the few memories I had of him before the divorce, teaching me to ride my bike in the park, his steady hand on the seat as I wobbled, reading bedtime stories, giving each character a unique voice. The Christmas morning he built me a dollhouse, his face alight with my delight. If he had loved me, then why had he vanished from my life? Why had he never fought to see me? These questions swirled in my tired mind as the minutes crawled by. Just as I began to doze off in the uncomfortable airport chair, a voice crackled over the PA system. "Attention, please. Will Blanche Williams please come to the information desk? Blanche Williams to the information desk, please." My heart jumped into my throat. I gathered my small suitcase and followed an airline employee who had come to escort me. Instead of heading to the main terminal, however, we passed through a series of secure corridors and checkpoints until we reached what appeared to be a private terminal section. "Your father has arranged for you to meet him here," the employee explained as we neared glass doors leading to the tarmac. That's when I saw it. A sleek, private jet, its stairs descending like an invitation. And walking down those stairs was a tall man in a business suit. His profile, so familiar yet aged, stole my breath. My father looked different than I remembered. His dark hair was now threaded with silver at the temples, and he moved with a quiet confidence I hadn't seen in my childhood. But his eyes, when they found mine, were exactly as I remembered, kind, with gentle crinkles at the corners. For a moment we both froze, simply taking each other in across the distance. Then he strode forward, closing the gap in seconds. He stopped just shy of embracing me, uncertainty etched on his features. "Blanche," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe it's really you." I didn't know what to say or do. Part of me yearned to throw myself into his arms like the little girl who used to greet him at the door. Another part, the guarded teenager who had felt abandoned by both parents, held back. He seemed to sense my hesitation. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "For everything. For not being there. For not fighting harder to stay in your life." Something in his raw sincerity broke through my carefully constructed defenses. The tears I thought I'd exhausted hours ago returned with renewed force. "She said you didn't want to see me anymore," I choked out. "That you had moved on." His face darkened. "That was never true. Not for a single day." He tentatively opened his arms, and this time, I didn't hesitate, stepping into his embrace and letting out years of pent-up grief against his shoulder. We stood like that for several minutes, both of us overwhelmed by emotion. When we finally separated, he kept one arm around my shoulders as he guided me toward the waiting plane. "Let's get you out of here," he said gently. "We can talk properly once we're in the air." The interior of the private jet was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Plush leather seats, polished wood tables, and soft lighting created an atmosphere of understated luxury. A flight attendant greeted us warmly and offered me a selection of drinks and snacks. As we settled into seats facing each other, I couldn't help but stare at my father in wonder. "Is this your plane?" He smiled, a hint of embarrassment crossing his features. "The company's technically. I'm the CEO of Horizon Tech now." "CEO?" I echoed, utterly disbelieving. My mother had always portrayed him as financially struggling, barely able to meet child support payments. "It's been a successful few years," he said simply, then leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "Blanche, I need you to know something. I've been trying to contact you for years. Birthday cards, Christmas gifts, phone calls, all of it. When your mother remarried and moved, I lost track of you completely. I hired private investigators who couldn't find your new address. I filed motions with the court that were somehow lost or delayed." My mind reeled as the implications of what he was saying sank in. "She kept you away from me, on purpose." He nodded, pain evident in his eyes. "I've been sending child support and additional money every month since the divorce. Money you never saw, I take it. I thought of the second-hand clothes, the times we'd eaten instant ramen for days straight, my mother's constant complaints about money. We were always broke," I whispered. "She said you barely paid child support." My father opened his briefcase and removed a thick folder, handing it to me. Inside were copies of cash checks, court documents, and records of attempted communications, all meticulously organized by date. The evidence of his relentless efforts and my mother's deliberate deception was overwhelming. "I don't show you this to hurt you," he said gently, "but you deserve to know the truth." As the plane took off, carrying me away from the airport where my mother had abandoned me, I felt strangely weightless, as if I were shedding years of misunderstandings and manipulations with each passing mile. My father explained that he now lived in Seattle, running the tech company he had co-founded shortly after the divorce. What had begun as a small startup had blossomed into a major industry player, bringing him a level of success he had never anticipated. "I kept your room ready," he said, a touch of vulnerability in his voice. "All these years. Just in case." The flight passed quickly as we began the delicate process of getting to know each other again. There were awkward silences and moments of overwhelming emotion, but beneath it all ran a current of genuine connection that felt both new and profoundly familiar. When we landed, a car was waiting to take us to his home. I pressed my face to the window as we drove through upscale neighborhoods before turning onto a private drive that wound up a hillside. The house that came into view stole my breath, a modern structure of glass and stone, perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. "Home sweet home," my father said, watching my reaction with a mix of pride and nervousness. "I hope you'll be comfortable here." A woman named Linda greeted us at the door. I initially tensed, wondering if she was my father's new wife, but he quickly introduced her as his executive assistant who had helped prepare for my arrival. "I've set up the blue bedroom for Blanche," she told my father. "Fresh towels in the ensuite bathroom, and I've stocked the kitchen with groceries. The security team has been updated to include her in the household." My father thanked her, and she departed with a warm smile in my direction. He then gave me a tour of the house, each room more beautiful than the last. When we reached what would be my bedroom, I stopped short in the doorway, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness evident in every detail. The room was painted a soft blue, with expansive windows overlooking the water. A plush queen-sized bed dominated one wall, while a desk, bookshelf, and comfortable reading chair created a perfect study nook by the window. But what truly captivated me was the collection of items on the dresser. "Are those?" I moved closer, unable to complete the question. My father nodded, his expression tender. "Birthday and Christmas presents. Every year since I lost contact with you, I couldn't deliver them, but I couldn't bear not to buy them either." Arranged chronologically were gifts appropriate for each age I had been, still in their original wrapping paper. Beside them sat a photo album, simply labeled Blanche. With trembling hands, I opened it to find the few photos my father had managed to collect of me growing up, school pictures my mother must have sent during the early years after the divorce, a newspaper clipping of me receiving an academic award in 6th grade, a blurry photo that appeared to have been taken from a distance of me leaving my old school. "You really did try to stay in my life," I whispered, the reality finally sinking in. "Every single day," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "And I'm not going anywhere now, if you'll let me be your dad again." That first night in my new home, we shared a meal delivered from a local restaurant. Neither of us was quite ready to tackle cooking. The conversation flowed more easily as exhaustion lowered my guards and food restored my energy. For the first time in years I felt seen and heard, my thoughts and feelings given value and consideration. As I finally crawled into the impossibly soft bed in my new room, emotional and physical exhaustion overtook me. My last conscious thought before drifting off to sleep was that perhaps being abandoned at the airport wasn't the ending I had feared, but rather the beginning I had always needed. I awoke the next morning, momentarily disoriented. The unfamiliar softness of the bed and the distant sound of waves crashing against the cliff below confused me. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, and I sat up, taking in my new surroundings in the clear light of morning. The room was even more beautiful than it had appeared last night. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting patterns across the pale blue carpet. I ran my fingers over the soft duvet, marveling at the contrast between this luxury and the life I had known. After showering in the ensuite bathroom, which featured a rainfall shower head and more toiletries than I had ever owned, I dressed in yesterday's clothes and ventured downstairs. I found my father in the kitchen, attempting to make pancakes with limited success. "Good morning," he said, looking up with a smile that turned sheepish as he gestured to the misshapen pancake in the pan. "I thought I'd make breakfast, but it seems my cooking skills haven't improved since you were little." The memory surfaced unbidden, Sunday mornings when he would attempt pancakes while my mother slept in. They were always oddly shaped, sometimes burned, but he had served them with such pride that I never complained. "I remember your pancakes," I said, sliding onto a stool at the kitchen island. "You used to make smiley faces with chocolate chips." His face lit up. "You remember that? You were so young. Some things stick with you," I replied, accepting the plate he offered. Despite their appearance, the pancakes tasted good, and the normalcy of sharing breakfast helped ease the lingering awkwardness between us. After we ate, my father gave me a proper tour of the house and grounds. The property was expansive, with manicured gardens leading down to private beach access. Inside, the house featured a home gym, a theater room, and an office with views that would make concentration impossible for most people. "I have some people I'd like you to meet today," he said as we returned to the main living area. "If you feel up to it." An hour later, I found myself sitting across from a distinguished woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Judith Bennett, a family law attorney. "What your mother did constitutes abandonment under the law," she explained, her tone professional but kind. "Leaving a minor without proper care arrangements is illegal. Additionally, there appears to be financial misconduct regarding the child support payments your father has been making." I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. "I don't want to get my mom in trouble. You just want to be safe and secure," Judith finished for me. "I understand, but we need to establish legal protection for you, especially if you wish to remain with your father." My father, who had been quietly listening, leaned forward. "Blanche, the choice is ultimately yours, but I want you to know that I'm prepared to seek full custody if that is what you want." The idea was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. "Can I really choose?" "You are 15, Judith said. "The court gives significant weight to the preferences of children your age, especially in cases involving abandonment or neglect." After the attorney left, my father showed me his office where he had meticulously documented every attempt to maintain contact with me. There were copies of court filings seeking visitation, records of calls to my mother that went unanswered, and even emails to my old school that had apparently never reached me. "She threatened legal action if I tried to contact you directly," he explained, showing me a letter from my mother's attorney dated 3 years ago. "She claimed I was harassing her and causing you emotional distress." Each revelation was another piece of the puzzle, completing a picture of deliberate separation that made my heart ache. "Why would she do this? Just to keep you away from me?" My father sighed. "I think it was more complicated than that. After the divorce, your mother struggled financially, which was partly my fault. I hadn't yet achieved success in my career. I think when the company took off and my financial situation improved dramatically, it was easier for her to maintain the narrative that I was uninvolved than to explain why she had kept us apart." 2 days after my arrival, as I was beginning to settle into a tentative routine with my father, my mother finally called. I stared at her name on my phone screen, a maelstrom of emotions rendering me temporarily paralyzed. "You don't have to answer," my father said gently, noticing my distress. After 4 rings, the call went to voicemail. A minute later, a notification appeared, indicating she had left a message. With trembling fingers, I pressed play and put the phone on speaker. "Blanche, honey, there seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding." My mother's voice emerged, falsely bright. "I thought you understood the plan was for you to stay home during our trip. Richard felt it would be good for you to have some independence, and I agreed. I didn't abandon you, sweetie. That's such a harsh word. Call me back so we can clear this up. The resort Wi-Fi is spotty, but I'll try to check my messages. Love you." The blatant rewriting of reality made my stomach churn. There had been no plan for me to stay home, no discussion of independence. She had abandoned me without warning, and was now attempting to gaslight me into doubting my own experience. Classic. My father muttered, shaking his head. She hasn't changed at all. I decided not to return the call. Instead, with the support of Judith Bennett and my father, I made the decision to stay in Seattle permanently. The attorney began the process of filing for a change in custody, gathering evidence of my mother's abandonment and financial misconduct. With the immediate legal matters in motion, my father turned his attention to practical concerns. You need clothes, school supplies, whatever personal items you want, he said. We can go shopping today if you feel up to it. The shopping trip was surreal. Accustomed to thrift stores and clearance racks, I was overwhelmed by my father's insistence that I choose whatever I liked without checking price tags. By the end of the day, I had a new wardrobe, a laptop for schoolwork, and a phone with unlimited data, a sharp contrast to the restricted plan my mother had grudgingly provided. That evening, sitting on the deck overlooking the ocean, my father and I had our first truly deep conversation about the divorce and the years of separation. Why did you and Mom split up? I asked the question that had haunted me since I was 8 years old, finally finding voice. He was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. The simplest answer is that we wanted different things from life. Your mother wanted financial security and social status above all else. When my first business venture failed, she saw me as a disappointment rather than a partner facing temporary setbacks. And you? I prompted. I wanted a true partnership, he replied. Someone who would weather the storms with me, not abandon ship at the first sign of rough waters. He looked at me, his eyes sad. I never wanted to leave you, Blanche. That was the hardest part. Your mother used her custody rights as a weapon, gradually restricting my access until I was effectively cut out of your life. As the days passed, we made plans for my future. My father contacted the best private school in Seattle, arranging for me to start when the fall semester began. A child psychologist was engaged to help me process the abandonment and years of manipulation. Slowly, I began to envision a life where I was valued and supported rather than merely tolerated. 1 week after my arrival in Seattle, my father and Judith Bennett suggested it was time to retrieve my belongings from my mother's house. With her still in Bali for another week, we had the perfect opportunity to enter the house legally, as I was still officially a resident, and collect my personal items without confrontation. You don't have to come if it would be too difficult, my father assured me. I can handle it with the legal team. But I knew this was something I needed to do myself, a necessary step in closing this painful chapter of my life. I want to go, I said firmly. There are things there that matter to me. The decision made, we began planning the trip with the precision of a military operation. Flights were booked, legal documents prepared, and a moving company engaged to transport my belongings. As the date approached, I found myself drafting and redrafting a letter to leave for my mother, trying to find words to express the depth of her betrayal and my decision to forge a new path. 3 days before my mother was scheduled to return from Bali, my father and I, accompanied by Judith Bennett and her assistant, arrived at the house I had shared with my mother and Richard's family. Using my key, I opened the front door to find the house exactly as it had been left, eerily silent and undisturbed. Walking into that space as essentially a visitor was a disorienting experience. Familiar surroundings suddenly felt foreign, as if I were seeing them through new eyes. The photographs on the walls, I noticed for the first time, featured primarily Richard and his children, with my mother occasionally included. There were almost no images of me, and none at all of me with my mother. "Where is your room?" my father asked quietly, his hand a reassuring presence on my shoulder. I led him upstairs to the smallest bedroom at the end of the hall, the one furthest from the master suite. Opening the door revealed my modest space, neat but impersonal, lacking the touches of indulgence visible in the stepchildren's rooms that we had passed. "This was your room?" My father's voice held a note of disbelief as he took in the basic furnishings and lack of decorative elements. "It's fine," I said automatically, the defensive response ingrained after years of being told I should be grateful for what I had. His expression softened. "No, sweetheart. It's not fine. You deserve better. With the help of the movers, we began the process of packing my belongings. Clothes went into wardrobe boxes, books and school supplies into smaller cartons. I was selective about what I took, leaving behind anything that had been gifts from my mother or Richard, taking only what truly belonged to me or held sentimental value. As I cleared my desk drawers, I found a box of keepsakes I had almost forgotten, pushed to the back of the bottom drawer. Inside were photos from before the divorce, a few birthday cards my father had sent in the early years after the separation, and a small teddy bear he had given me on my 5th birthday. You kept these, he said, his voice thick with emotion as I showed him the mementos. I never really believed she was telling the truth about you not caring, I admitted. Not completely. In my closet, behind a row of shoes, I discovered something that made my blood run cold, a stack of envelopes bound with a rubber band, all addressed to me in my father's handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened the first one to find a birthday card for my 13th birthday, containing a heartfelt message and a gift card that had never been used. One by one, I opened the envelopes, each containing evidence of my father's continued efforts to remain in my life. Efforts my mother had deliberately hidden from me. Cards for every birthday and Christmas. A letter explaining his new address and phone number when he moved to Seattle. Photos of him at his company headquarters with a note saying he hoped I would visit someday. She kept all of these from me, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. All this time, I thought you had forgotten about me. My father pulled me into a tight embrace. Never. Not for a single day. As the movers continued their work, I wandered into my mother's home office, drawn by a need to understand why she had gone to such lengths to separate me from my father. Judith had advised that personal documents related to me were legally mine to take, so I began searching through the filing cabinet. In a folder labeled Divorce, I found financial records that confirmed what my father had told me: monthly child support payments, far larger than what my mother had claimed to receive, had been deposited regularly into an account I had never known existed. There were also court documents showing my father's repeated petitions for visitation, all opposed by my mother with various fabricated excuses. Most damning of all was a draft of a letter to her attorney, dated around the time she met Richard, outlining a strategy to minimize the father's influence as she integrated into her new partner's life. I was referred to as a complication that needed to be managed carefully to ensure Richard's continued interest. By late afternoon, the packing was complete. As the movers loaded the last of the boxes into their truck, I sat at my now empty desk and wrote the letter I had been composing in my mind for days. Dear Mom, it began, the formality of mother, feeling too distant, the warmth of mommy, impossibly out of reach. I poured out my feelings of betrayal, not just from the airport abandonment, but from years of being made to feel like an inconvenience. I explained that I had found the hidden letters and financial records, that I knew the truth about her systematic campaign to keep my father from me. I am choosing to live with Dad now, I wrote near the end. Not as revenge, but because I deserve to be somewhere I am wanted and valued. I hope someday you will understand the damage your choices have caused, not just to me, but to yourself. Despite everything, I don't hate you. But I need to love myself enough to leave. I placed the letter on the stripped mattress of what had been my bed, the white paper stark against the bare blue sheet. As a final touch, I left the house key beside it, a symbolic relinquishment of my place in this household. Walking out of that house for the last time, I felt a complex mixture of grief, relief, and resolution. My father waited by the car, his expression concerned. All done? He asked. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. He seemed to understand, opening the car door for me without further questions. As we drove away, I didn't look back at the house. Instead, I looked forward, towards the future I was now free to create. My mother returned from Bali 3 days later. Within hours, my phone exploded with notifications, a barrage of increasingly frantic messages. Asterisk, where are you? Why is your room empty? Call me immediately. Blanche, this is not funny. Come home right now. I just spoke to your father's lawyer. How could you do this to me after everything I have done for you? Please come home, sweetie. We can work it out. I miss you. The messages cycled through anger, manipulation, and false contrition in a predictable pattern. I showed them to my father and Judith, who advised me not to respond until the legal proceedings were further along. A week after her return, my mother showed up unannounced at my father's house, having somehow obtained the address. The security system alerted us to her presence at the gate, her luxury SUV visible on the monitor as she repeatedly pressed the intercom button. You don't have to see her, my father assured me. We can have security turn her away. But I knew this confrontation was inevitable, and perhaps necessary. I'll talk to her, but I want you and Judith there too. My mother's face when the front door opened was a study in conflicting emotions, relief at finding me battling with outrage at the situation. She wore an expensive sundress and designer sunglasses pushed up into her perfectly highlighted hair, the picture of affluent suburbia. Blanche, thank God! She exclaimed, stepping forward as if to embrace me. I took an instinctive step back, and her arms dropped to her sides. What is going on? Why did you leave? Why are you with him? The last word was infused with such venom that I flinched. Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside, my father suggested, his voice calm but firm. Once seated in the living room, with Judith present as both legal counsel and witness, my mother's facade began to crack. Her eyes darted around the beautiful space, taking in the obvious wealth and taste evident in every detail. So this is what this is about, she said with a brittle laugh. He has lured you away with promises of luxury. I should have known. That's not why I'm here, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. I'm here because you abandoned me at an airport. I'm here because you have been lying to me about Dad for years. I'm here because I found all the letters and cards you hid from me. Her expression faltered, then hardened. You went through my private things? How dare you? They were addressed to me, I countered. They were mine to read. You are 15 years old, she snapped. Everything under my roof belongs to me, including your correspondence. I was protecting you from his inconsistency, his broken promises. My father, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. There were no broken promises, Karen. Only your systematic efforts to erase me from our daughter's life. You have no right to judge me, she hissed. You have no idea what it was like raising her alone while you were off becoming a millionaire. I sent child support every month, he replied evenly. Far more than the court ordered. Money you apparently spent on yourself while telling Blanche you were struggling. My mother's face flushed. That is a lie. I sacrificed everything for her, including abandoning her at an airport so you could vacation with your new family. Judith interjected, her professional tone making the accusation even more damning. For a moment, my mother seemed at a loss for words. Then her eyes narrowed as she turned back to me. I didn't abandon you. I gave you an opportunity for independence. If you had just gone home as instructed, none of this drama would have been necessary. The blatant rewriting of reality made my chest tight with anger. You left me alone at an international airport with $200 and no house key. You didn't tell me to go home until you were walking away. You didn't answer my calls or texts. How is that an opportunity? You are twisting what happened, she insisted, though her voice had lost some of its conviction. My father leaned forward. Karen, we have security footage from the airport. We have witness statements from airline staff. And we have the text messages you sent Blanche after the fact trying to cover your tracks. The color drained from my mother's face. You're building a case against me. You want to take my daughter and throw me in jail too, after everything we meant to each other. This is not about punishment, Judith explained. This is about establishing what is in Blanche's best interests going forward. She has expressed a clear desire to live with her father, and given the circumstances, the court is highly likely to honor that wish. My mother's composure crumbled entirely. Tears streamed down her face as she turned to me. Blanche, please. I made a mistake. I was wrong. But you can't leave me for him. We are a family. We stopped being a family when you decided Richard and his children were more important than me, I said quietly. Maybe even before that, when you started lying about Dad. It wasn't like that. She protested weakly. Then what was it like? I asked. Help me understand why you would hide Dad's letters, lie about child support, and then abandon me for a vacation. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, apparently unable to formulate a justification even she could believe. Finally, she whispered, Richard thought it would be better if you stayed home. He said the resort was really for adults and his children, who were used to that lifestyle. I was afraid of losing him. The raw honesty was somehow more painful than her earlier attempts at manipulation. So, you chose him over me. I chose financial security. She countered. Do you have any idea what it is like to be a single mother with no money? Richard offered us a better life. He offered you a better life. I corrected. I was just excess baggage. Before she could respond, the front door opened and Richard himself strode in, his face tight with anger. Karen, this has gone on long enough. Get in the car now. My father stood immediately. How did you get past security? Richard ignored him, focusing on my mother. I told you not to come here. You are just making things worse. Our lawyer said not to have any contact. My mother seemed to shrink under his gaze, her brief moment of honesty evaporating as she reverted to the compliant wife. I just wanted to see Blanche. And now you have, he said dismissively. Let us go. As my mother rose to follow him, I called after her. Is this really what you want, Mom? Someone who treats you like a child and me like an inconvenience? She paused, conflict evident in her expression. But Richard took her elbow firmly. The car, Karen. Now. The last image I had of my mother that day was her back as she walked away, just as it had been at the airport. But this time, I was not the one being left behind. In the aftermath of that confrontation, my father's legal team filed for a restraining order after Richard attempted to enter the property again the following day. The court granted the order, and a temporary custody arrangement was put in place pending a full hearing. The hardest part was accepting that my mother had chosen her new life over me, not just once at the airport, but repeatedly over the years with each hidden letter and each lie about my father. The girl who had once believed she was the center of her mother's world had to confront the painful reality that she had been, at best, an afterthought. The months following my mother's dramatic visit were challenging but transformative. Adjusting to life with my father involved creating new routines, establishing boundaries, and learning to trust that his presence in my life was permanent. I began seeing Dr. Eleanor Wilson, a therapist specializing in adolescent trauma and parental abandonment. Our weekly sessions provided a safe space to process the complex emotions surrounding my mother's betrayal and the years of manipulation. What you are feeling is entirely normal, Dr. Wilson assured me during one particularly difficult session. Anger, grief, relief, guilt, they can all coexist. Healing is not linear. With her guidance, I began to understand that my mother's actions reflected her own brokenness rather than my worth. This realization did not excuse what she had done, but it helped me carry the burden with less self-blame. People who are whole do not abandon their children. Dr. Wilson explained. Your mother's choices speak to her limitations, not yours. My father enrolled me in Westlake Academy, one of Seattle's premier private schools, for my sophomore year. The transition was both exciting and intimidating. After years of being the outsider in Richard's home, I was wary of forming new connections. But to my surprise, I found myself making genuine friends for the first time in years. Zoe and Aiden, twins who shared my love of literature, adopted me into their friend group with an ease that felt almost suspicious at first. Haley, a gifted artist who recognized my tentative attempts at sketching, offered to teach me proper techniques during lunch periods. Slowly, I began to lower my defenses, allowing these new friends glimpses of my true self. You're different from when you first came here, Zoe commented one afternoon as we walked home from school. Less guarded. I guess I'm learning that not everyone has an agenda. I replied, the insight surprising even me. Building a relationship with my father was a delicate dance of rediscovery. We were simultaneously getting to know each other, as we were now, and reconciling memories of who we had been. Sometimes the past and present aligned perfectly, like when he remembered my childhood love of stargazing and installed a powerful telescope on the deck. Other times, the years of separation created unexpected gaps, moments of disconnect that reminded us of all we had missed. I wish I had been there for your first day of middle school, he said one evening as we looked through photos I had brought from my mother's house. Your science fair projects, your first crush. We cannot get those years back. I told him, surprising myself with the role reversal, me comforting him. But we have now, and the future. He squeezed my hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. When did you get so wise? Trauma has its benefits. I joked, the dark humor a sign of my gradual healing. 6 months after I moved in with my father, the court granted him full legal custody. My mother, represented by an expensive attorney Richard had hired, fought the decision initially, but eventually agreed to the arrangement. After Judith presented the overwhelming evidence of abandonment and financial misconduct, the judge ordered my mother to repay the misappropriated child support funds and established a structured visitation schedule that would begin only after I completed a certain number of joint therapy sessions with her. It was more consideration than she deserved, in my opinion. But my father gently reminded me that maintaining some relationship with her might be important to my long-term emotional health. You can be angry with her, even hate what she did, without severing the connection completely, he advised. But the choice is ultimately yours. I will support whatever you decide. I agreed to the joint therapy. Though the first few sessions were excruciating, my mother vacillated between tearful apologies and subtle attempts to justify her actions. Her narrative had shifted from denying abandonment to framing it as a misguided attempt to please Richard, as if that somehow made it less damaging. I just wanted us to have security, she repeated often. I was afraid of ending up alone and broke, so you made sure I ended up alone at an airport instead. I responded during one particularly tense session. Over time, I established firm boundaries with my mother. I would not return to live with her, regardless of promises or emotional appeals. I would not pretend the past had not happened. I would not allow her to rewrite our history to ease her guilt. These terms were non-negotiable, and slowly, she seemed to accept them. My father remained remarkably neutral throughout this process, never speaking ill of my mother despite everything she had done. When I asked him about this restraint, his answer stayed with me. Hating her would only hurt you, he explained. You are half her, whether we like it or not. Besides, she gave me you, and for that, I can forgive almost anything. The first holiday season with my father and his extended family, grandparents and cousins I barely remembered, was a revelation. The genuine warmth and inclusion I experienced stood in stark contrast to the performative family dinners at Richard's house, where I had always felt like an unwelcome guest. My paternal grandmother, a vibrant woman in her 70s, pulled me aside during Christmas dinner. You have your father's resilience, she told me, her eyes crinkling with affection, and his heart. But that spark, that fire when you talk about things that matter to you, that is all your own. High school graduation came 3 years later. My father beamed with pride as I delivered the valedictorian address. My mother attended, sitting awkwardly in the row behind my father and his parents. Our relationship had evolved into something cordial, if not close, built on careful honesty rather than the false harmony she would have preferred. College took me to the East Coast, where I pursued a degree in psychology with a minor in family law. The distance from both parents allowed me to define myself beyond the dynamics of their divorce and the drama of my teenage years. I discovered passions and strengths I might never have recognized had my life continued on its previous path. In my junior year, I interned with a nonprofit organization supporting children of divorce, using my experience to help others navigate similar challenges. This work eventually led to my career path, developing programs for family courts to better consider children's needs during custody proceedings. The journey toward forgiveness was long and nonlinear. Some days, the memory of my mother's casual shrug as she abandoned me at the airport still had the power to steal my breath. Other days, I could acknowledge her humanity, her flaws, and her limited capacity with compassion rather than bitterness. Forgiveness does not mean what happened was okay. My therapist had explained years earlier. It means you are choosing not to let it consume your future. On my 25th birthday, I wrote my mother a letter, expressing this hard-won understanding. I have learned that people can only give what they have within themselves to give. I wrote, "Your capacity for unconditional love was damaged long before I came along. Recognizing this has freed me from expecting what you could never provide." Her response was surprisingly self-aware. "You deserve better than what I could be as a mother." She wrote back, "I am sorry for that every day. When I married at 28, my father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. From the moment you called me from that airport, all I wanted was to see you happy and whole," he whispered before giving my hand to my soon-to-be husband. "Look at you now." My mother attended the wedding with her new partner, Richard, long gone after their eventual divorce. She participated appropriately, but without attempting to claim credit for the woman I had become, a restraint that reflected her own growth over the years. As I built my own family, I carried forward the lessons from both parents, a roadmap of what to emulate and what to avoid. From my father, I learned the patient persistence of true love and the courage to begin again after loss. From my mother, I learned the importance of self-sufficiency and the danger of placing status above authentic connection. The airport abandonment, which once defined me, gradually became just one chapter in a much longer story. A pivotal moment, certainly, but not the conclusion. In an unexpected way, being left behind had propelled me forward, forcing me to discover strengths I might otherwise never have recognized. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my mother had taken me to Bali that day, if she had chosen me over Richard's preferences. Would I still be caught in the cycle of seeking her conditional approval? Would I have discovered my father's unwavering love? Would I have found my voice and purpose? These questions have no answers, of course. Life offers no parallel versions to compare with the path we actually walk. All I know with certainty is that families are defined not by biology or legal documents, but by the consistent choice to show up, to value, to prioritize one another. My father taught me that. My mother, in her absence, confirmed it. If you have ever felt abandoned or betrayed by someone who should have protected you, know that your worth was never determined by their failure. Their limitations are not your destiny. Family can be found and created in unexpected places if you remain open to connection, even after heartbreak. What would you have done if you were in my shoes that day at the airport?